My name is Alexa, and I am 32 years old. I spent 5 years building a life with a man I believed was my soulmate. But at our 5th anniversary dinner, surrounded by 60 guests in a fancy restaurant, my husband stood up, raised his champagne glass, and called me a gold-digging nobody in front of everyone we knew. The guests laughed. His mother smiled with satisfaction. His mistress watched from the corner of the room with gleaming eyes. What none of them knew was that I had prepared a surprise of my own, one that would destroy everything they thought they had won. Before I reveal what was inside that folder, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next at that dinner table changed everything forever. Let me take you back 6 years before that devastating night. I was 26 years old, working as a junior accountant at a small firm downtown. I had grown up in a modest household in Ohio, the kind where money was always tight, but love was abundant. My father worked as an electrician, spending long hours fixing wiring in other people's houses so we could keep the lights on in our own. My mother was a nurse at the local hospital, working double shifts during flu season and holidays because the overtime pay helped cover our bills. They taught me the value of hard work, of earning everything you have, of never expecting handouts from anyone. I put myself through college, taking out student loans and working part-time at a coffee shop between classes. I graduated with a degree in accounting and landed my first real job, feeling like I had accomplished something meaningful. I was building a life on my own terms, slowly but steadily, climbing the ladder through sheer determination. Then I met Derek. It happened at a networking event hosted by the local Chamber of Commerce. I had almost not attended, exhausted from a long week of balancing spreadsheets and reconciling accounts. But my supervisor insisted it would be good for my career, so I put on my nicest blazer and showed up with a stack of business cards I never ended up distributing. Derek was impossible to miss. He commanded attention the moment he walked into the room, tall and confident, with the kind of easy charm that made everyone around him feel special. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and when he smiled, it was like the whole room got a little brighter. I noticed him immediately, but assumed someone like him would never notice someone like me. I was wrong. He approached me at the refreshment table while I was nervously sipping sparkling water and pretending to be interested in the cheese platter. He introduced himself and asked what I did for a living. When I told him I was an accountant, he did not do what most people did, which was nod politely and change the subject. Instead, he asked me detailed questions about my work, about what I found challenging, about what I loved. He seemed genuinely interested, and I found myself talking more than I had talked to anyone in months. By the end of the evening, he had asked for my number. I gave it to him, never expecting him to actually call. He called the next morning. Over the following weeks, Derek pursued me with an intensity that was both flattering and overwhelming. Flowers arrived at my office. Reservations appeared at restaurants I could never afford. He took me to art galleries and symphony performances, opening up a world I had only ever seen in movies. He told me he admired my work ethic, my independence, my refusal to be impressed by money alone. I learned about his background gradually. His father, Harold, owned a successful chain of car dealerships across the state, a business that had been in the family for 3 generations. His mother, Constance, was what people called a socialite, spending her days organizing charity galas and her evenings attending country club events. Derek worked as vice president of the family company, a position that came with a corner office and a salary I could not even comprehend. The gap between our worlds terrified me. I told him so on our 5th date, sitting across from him at a restaurant where the menu did not have prices, because if you had to ask, you could not afford it. I said I was not sure I belonged in his life, that I was just a girl from Ohio who had never owned anything designer and did not know the difference between champagne and sparkling wine. Derek took my hand across the table and looked into my eyes with such sincerity that my heart ached. He said he did not care about any of that. He said he had dated plenty of women from wealthy families, women who understood which fork to use and which charities were fashionable to support, and none of them had made him feel the way I did. He said he loved me for who I was, not for what I came from. I believed him. We dated for a year, and it was the happiest year of my life. He introduced me to his family, which was admittedly awkward. His mother, Constance, looked me up and down the first time we met and said something I will never forget. She said it was so brave of me to marry above my station, that most girls in my position would be too intimidated to try. At the time, I thought she was trying to be encouraging in her own clumsy way. Looking back, I realized she was marking her territory, letting me know exactly where I stood in her eyes. Derek proposed after 12 months together. He took me to the beach at sunset, got down on one knee and presented me with a diamond ring so large it looked almost comical on my practical hand. I said yes through tears of joy, and he spun me around in his arms while the waves crashed behind us. The engagement period was when the first real warning signs appeared, though I was too blinded by love to recognize them. His family insisted on a prenuptial agreement. Derek presented it to me apologetically, explaining that his father required it for all family members, that it was just a formality to protect the business assets. I did not have much to protect, so I agreed without hesitation. I wanted to prove that I was not after their money, that I loved Derek, not for his family fortune. I signed the document their lawyer prepared, barely reading through the dense legal language. I trusted them. That was my first mistake. The wedding was extravagant beyond anything I could have imagined. Constance took over all the planning, which I initially appreciated, because I had no idea how to organize an event of that scale. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being my wedding and became her production. The flowers I wanted were replaced with arrangements she deemed more appropriate. The small band I suggested was swapped for a 12-piece orchestra. My guest list of 40 friends and family members was dwarfed by the 300 people she invited from her social circle. I walked down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my parents' car toward a man I loved with my whole heart, surrounded by strangers who whispered about where I came from and how lucky I was to have landed Derek. My father squeezed my hand before giving me away and whispered that he was proud of me. My mother cried in the front row, looking out of place among the designer gowns and expensive jewelry. I told myself it did not matter that our worlds were different. Love would be enough. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Derek suggested I quit my job to focus on being a wife, a term I found oddly old-fashioned. He said I did not need to work, that he made more than enough money for both of us, that my time would be better spent managing our household and attending social events as his partner. I hesitated, but he was so persuasive, so charming in the way he painted our future together. I gave my 2 weeks' notice and said goodbye to the career I had worked so hard to build. Without my job, I quickly lost my financial independence. Derek gave me a credit card for household expenses, but every purchase was tracked and reviewed. He said it was just how wealthy families manage their finances, that it was normal. I did not know any better, so I believed him. We moved into a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of place with manicured lawns and security gates. It should have felt like a dream come true. Instead, it felt like a gilded cage. I had no car of my own because Derek said we could share his. I had no income because I had quit my job. My friends from before slowly drifted away because I no longer had time for coffee dates and casual dinners. My world shrank until it contained only Derek, his family, and their expectations. By year 3, the cracks in our fairy tale had become impossible to ignore. Derek worked late nearly every night, or at least he said he was working. His phone was always face down, always on silent. When I asked about his day, he gave vague answers and changed the subject. When I suggested we spend more time together, he accused me of being needy and demanding. I started wanting to go back to work to reclaim some piece of myself that had gotten lost along the way. Derek was furious when I brought it up. He said no wife of his was going to work like she needed money. He said it would embarrass him in front of his family and business associates. We argued about it for weeks until I finally dropped the subject, too exhausted to keep fighting. His mother, Constance, visited frequently, always finding something to criticize. The house was not decorated properly. My cooking was not sophisticated enough. My clothes were not appropriate for someone of Derek's status. She never said I was not good enough directly, but the message was clear in every raised eyebrow and subtle correction. Year 4 brought more distance. Derek started traveling for business several times a month, trips that kept him away for days at a time. He would return with gifts, expensive jewelry, and designer bags, as if material items could replace the emotional connection we were losing. I began to feel like a decoration in my own life, something pretty to display at parties, but ignored the rest of the time. I noticed things. a receipt for a hotel stay on a weekend when he said he was at a conference, a text notification that disappeared before I could read it, the scent of perfume on his collar that was not mine. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining problems because I was unhappy. I loved my husband, and I wanted desperately to believe he still loved me. Then came year 5, and everything I thought I knew came crashing down. It started 3 months before our anniversary. I was cleaning Derek's home office because our housekeeper had called in sick, and Constance was coming for dinner. Derek was particular about that room, always keeping the door closed and asking me not to disturb his papers. But that day, I needed to vacuum and dust, and I did not think twice about entering. I was wiping down his desk when I noticed one of the drawers was slightly ajar. It was the drawer he always kept locked, the one he said contained sensitive business documents. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it open. Inside was an old phone, the kind of basic smartphone people used before upgrading to newer models. I recognized it as the phone Derek had supposedly lost 2 years ago, the one he had been so upset about misplacing. He had bought a new one immediately, claiming his contacts and photos were all backed up to the cloud. I never thought about it again until that moment. The phone still had battery life, barely but enough to power on. There was no password protecting it, which should have been my first clue that Derek never expected anyone to find it. I opened the messages folder, and my world collapsed. There were hundreds of texts exchanged with someone named Megan. The conversations dated back 2 years, starting just a few months after Derek claimed to have lost this phone. I scrolled through them with trembling hands, my stomach churning with each new message. The conversations were intimate in a way that left no room for innocent interpretation. Pet names and inside jokes, plans for hotel meetups and secret dinners, declarations of love and promises for the future. One message from Derek made my blood run cold. He had written to Megan saying that I was just the boring wife he got stuck with, that she was his real love, the one he wanted to spend his life with. He said he was waiting for the right time to divorce me, when he could do it without losing money to someone like me. Megan had responded asking when that would be. Derek replied that he needed to be strategic, that the prenup protected him, but he wanted to make sure I walked away with absolutely nothing. He said his family lawyer was working on some adjustments to make the terms even more favorable. I kept reading each message, more devastating than the last. Derek mocking my background, Megan asking if I suspected anything, Derek laughing about how naive I was, how easy to manipulate. And then I discovered who Megan actually was. In one conversation, Derek mentioned that Megan should be careful around Clarissa, that his sister could not know about them. Megan responded that it was hard keeping secrets from her best friend of 15 years, but Derek was worth it. Megan was Clarissa's best friend. Derek was having an affair with his own sister's closest companion. I sat on the floor of that office for what felt like hours, my heart shattered into pieces too small to count. The man I had given up everything for, my career, my independence, my identity, had been betraying me for 2 years. He had been planning to discard me like garbage while keeping his mistress waiting in the wings. The old version of me might have confronted him immediately. She might have screamed and cried and demanded explanations. But something had shifted inside me in that moment. The tears came, yes, but underneath them was something harder, colder, more calculated. Anger that burned like ice rather than fire. I did not confront Derek that night. Instead, I took photographs of every single message on that phone, hundreds of screenshots that I emailed to a secret account I created on the spot. Then I placed the phone exactly where I found it, closed the drawer, and finished cleaning the office as if nothing had happened. When Derek came home that evening, I smiled and kissed his cheek and asked about his day. He lied smoothly about a meeting that ran late, and I nodded and said nothing. I had become an actress in my own life, playing the role of oblivious wife while plotting my next move. The following week, I took a risk. I searched online for private investigators and found one who came highly recommended for discretion. His name was Frank, a former police detective who had retired early to start his own surveillance business. I met him at a coffee shop on the other side of town, where no one would recognize me, and I told him everything. Frank did not seem surprised by my story. He said he had heard variations of it dozens of times over his career. He quoted me a price that was steep, but I had been secretly saving small amounts from my household budget for months, telling myself it was for emergencies. This qualified. For 2 weeks, Frank followed Derek and Megan. He documented their meetings with photographs and timestamps. Hotel rooms in the middle of the afternoon. Romantic dinners at restaurants where Derek never took me. A weekend getaway to a coastal resort when Derek told me he was attending a business conference in Chicago. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but I was not done gathering information. I needed to understand the prenup I had signed. The document Derek seemed so confident would protect him in a divorce. I found a lawyer named Patricia through a recommendation from a women's advocacy group. She specialized in family law and had a reputation for fighting hard for clients who had been wronged. Patricia reviewed my copy of the prenup and compared it to the standard version used by Derek's family lawyer. What she found made her visibly angry. The document I signed had been altered after my signature was already on it. Entire clauses had been added that were not there when I agreed to the terms. Provisions that stripped me of virtually any claim to marital assets, even in cases of infidelity or abuse. The signatures on the altered pages were forgeries, good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. Patricia explained that this constituted fraud. The prenup was not just unfair, it was illegal. Any court would throw it out once presented with the evidence of tampering. More importantly, without a valid prenup, I was entitled to 50% of all marital assets under state law. Derek's confident assumption that I would leave with nothing was based on a lie. I asked Patricia to start preparing divorce papers, but to keep them confidential for now. I had a plan forming in my mind, one that would require precise timing and flawless execution. Around the same time, I discovered something else while going through financial records Patricia had requested. Derek had been transferring money from his family company into a private account amounts that totaled over $200,000 over the past 18 months. The money trail led directly to expenses for Megan gifts, trips and apartment lease in her name. Derek had been embezzling from his own family business to fund his affair. I documented everything and saved it for the right moment. 2 weeks before our anniversary, Derek announced his plans for a celebration. He wanted to host a grand party at the Grand Meridian, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. He spoke about it with unusual enthusiasm, describing how he wanted to gather family and friends and business partners to celebrate 5 years of marriage. I found his sudden sentimentality suspicious. Derek had never been particularly romantic about anniversaries. Previous years had been marked with obligatory dinners and expensive gifts transactions more than celebrations. This elaborate party felt different, and I sensed an ulterior motive. My suspicions were confirmed when I checked the spyware I had secretly installed on his current phone. I am not proud of that invasion of privacy, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I found messages between Derek and Megan discussing the anniversary party. Derek wrote that at the dinner he would finally end the farce of our marriage. He planned to expose me as a gold digger in front of everyone, to humiliate me publicly before announcing he was filing for divorce. He said he wanted our entire social circle to see what kind of person I really was. Megan responded with excitement. She asked Derek to make sure the humiliation was thorough, that she wanted to watch me crumble. She said she had waited 2 years for this moment and could not wait for them to finally be together openly. Reading those messages, I felt something unexpected. Not despair, not defeat. Instead, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. Derek wanted to humiliate me at our anniversary dinner. Fine, I would let him try, but he had no idea who he was really married to. I began preparing my counterattack with military precision. I organized my evidence into a folder. The original prenup and the fraudulent versions side by side with highlighted differences. Photographs from Frank showing Derek and Megan together. Printed screenshots of their text messages, including the ones where Derek called me a boring nobody, and Megan asked him to humiliate me. Financial records showing the embezzlement from his family company. I contacted Patricia and asked her to prepare divorce papers that would be ready to serve at a moment's notice. She agreed, her eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a lawyer who knew she had an airtight case. I reached out to Harper, an investigative journalist who wrote for a publication that covered the social elite. I had found her through research, noting her reputation for exposing hypocrisy among the wealthy. I told her there might be a story at an upcoming society event. She was intrigued enough to accept an invitation posing as the guest of one of Derek's business partners. I set up an automated system to send Derek's affair evidence to everyone in his contact list. Business partners, clients, extended family golf buddies, everyone he knew. The messages would go out with a single tap on my phone, and there would be no way to stop them once they started. Finally, I composed an email to Harold Derek's father. The email contained all the evidence of embezzlement, every transaction, every receipt, every dollar Derek had stolen from the family company to spend on his mistress. I scheduled it to send automatically 30 minutes before the anniversary party started. The week before the dinner passed in a strange blur. Derek was unusually attentive, buying me a stunning red dress and complimenting me more than he had in years. He probably wanted me to look my best for my own humiliation. I accepted his gifts with gracious smiles and thanked him for being so thoughtful. At night, I lay beside him in bed, listening to him breathe, wondering how I had ever loved someone capable of such cruelty. The man I married did not exist. He had been a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to trap me. The real Derek was the one in those text messages, mocking me, using me, planning to discard me. 3 days before the party, I called my parents in Ohio and told them everything. It was the first time I had been truly honest with them since my wedding day. My mother cried on the phone. My father's voice went quiet and hard in the way it only did when he was furious. They wanted to fly out immediately to confront Derek themselves, but I begged them to let me handle it my way. They agreed reluctantly, telling me they loved me and were proud of my strength. My friend Denise, the one real friend I had managed to keep from my former life, drove into town and took me to lunch. She listened to my plan with wide eyes and then laughed with something between admiration and disbelief. She offered to be my getaway driver on the night of the party, waiting outside the restaurant in case I needed to make a quick exit. I accepted gratefully. The night before my anniversary, I did not sleep. I lay in the darkness of my bedroom, running through scenarios in my mind, preparing for every possible outcome. Derek snored beside me, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. I thought about the woman I had been 6 years ago, the one who worked hard and believed in herself and did not need anyone's money to feel valuable. Somewhere along the way, I had lost her. Derek and his family had slowly eroded my confidence, made me doubt my worth, convinced me I was lucky to be tolerated by people so far above my station. But that woman was still inside me, waiting. And tomorrow, she was coming back. The morning of my 5th wedding anniversary dawned bright and clear. I woke early, took a long shower, and began the process of transformation. Hair styled to perfection, makeup flawless. The red dress Derek had bought me fit like a second skin, elegant and striking. I looked at myself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back. She looked powerful, dangerous, ready. Derek complimented me effusively as we prepared to leave. He said I had never looked more beautiful, that he was proud to have me on his arm. The irony was suffocating. We arrived at the Grand Meridian early to greet guests as they arrived. The restaurant had outdone itself with the decorations Constance had insisted upon: white roses and candles covering every surface, crystal champagne glasses catching the light. A private room in the back had been reserved large enough to accommodate 60 people comfortably. Constance was the first to arrive, dressed in silk that probably cost as much as my parents' monthly mortgage payment. She looked me up and down with her usual critical eye. Red was an interesting choice, she remarked. So bold. Or should I say desperate? I smiled sweetly and thanked her for the observation. Harold arrived shortly after, and I noticed immediately that something was different about him. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. He barely looked at Derek, instead, taking his seat at the head table with an expression that suggested he had a lot on his mind. I knew my email had reached him. Clarissa came with her husband, laughing and chatting about something inconsequential. She had no idea that her best friend had been sleeping with her brother, that the betrayal ran so deep and close to home. Following behind her, trying to look casual, was Megan. Megan had not been officially invited, but she had apparently convinced Clarissa that she wanted to personally congratulate Derek and me on our anniversary. In reality, she was there to watch my destruction. She found a seat near the back of the room, her eyes following Derek with barely concealed anticipation. More guests arrived in waves. Derek's business partners in expensive suits, country club friends of his parents, distant relatives I had met only at our wedding and barely remembered. Almost none of them were there for me. I had no family present, no friends of my own. I was surrounded by Derek's world exactly as he wanted it. At 7 o'clock, I spotted Harper entering quietly, a notebook discreetly tucked into her purse. She found a seat near the middle of the room, looking like just another society guest, while her journalist eyes took in every detail. 10 minutes later, I saw Patricia arrive with her assistant. They did not draw attention to themselves, simply finding seats near the exit and waiting. The divorce papers were in a leather portfolio resting on Patricia's lap. Everything was in position. The cocktail hour passed with excruciating slowness. I smiled and made small talk and accepted congratulations from people who had never bothered to learn my last name. Derek worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and slapping backs, performing the role of devoted husband with practiced ease. At 8 o'clock, dinner service began. Oysters and lobster bisque for the first course dishes, so refined they felt wasted on an audience that took such luxury for granted. I picked at my food, my appetite non-existent, my stomach tight with anticipation. Throughout the meal, Derek made pointed comments that went over most people's heads, but landed directly on target for me. He talked about how his wife had always appreciated the finer things in life, things she never would have experienced without his generosity. Constance smiled approvingly. A few guests chuckled at what they assumed was affectionate teasing. I caught Megan watching from her table near the back, her lips curved in a smirk. She was waiting for the main event the moment Derek had promised her, the humiliation she had specifically requested. The main course arrived. Filet mignon cooked perfectly, accompanied by vegetables arranged like artwork. I could barely taste any of it. My hand kept drifting to my clutch bag, feeling the folder inside, reminding myself that everything I needed was within reach. At 9 o'clock, Derek stood up and clinked his champagne glass. The room fell silent instantly. This is it, I thought. Showtime. Derek cleared his throat and surveyed the room with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. His smile was brilliant, practiced completely false. 5 years ago, he began his voice carrying to every corner, I made a decision that changed my life. I married Alexa. Applause rippled through the room. I kept my expression neutral, waiting. Derek continued, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly. But tonight, I have something important to share with all of you, something I have wanted to say for a long time. He paused for effect, and I saw Megan lean forward in her seat. For 5 years, Derek said, I have tried to make this marriage work. I gave Alexa everything, a beautiful home, a comfortable life, status and position that someone from her background could never have dreamed of achieving. The shift in his words was becoming clearer now. Several guests exchanged confused glances. But some people are never satisfied, Derek declared, his voice hardening. Some people always want more than they deserve, and I have come to realize that I wasted 5 years of my life on a gold-digging nobody who was never worthy of what I offered her. Gasps echoed through the room. Constance was nodding approvingly. Clarissa's mouth hung open, though whether from shock or delight was unclear. Megan looked like she might explode from contained glee. Tonight, Derek announced triumphantly, I am publicly declaring that I am filing for divorce. Alexa will leave this marriage with nothing exactly as she deserves. Our prenuptial agreement ensures that she will not receive a single penny of family money. She will go back to being the nobody she always was. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To freedom. To finally being free from this mistake. A smattering of applause came from his family's side of the room. Others sat in stunned silence, unsure how to react to such a public dismantling of a marriage. Derek turned to me with a triumphant smile, clearly expecting tears or begging, or perhaps an undignified escape. Nothing to say, sweetheart. No more acting, no more pretending to be something you are not. I let his words hang in the air for a long moment. Then slowly I stood up. Every eye in the room fixed on me as I rose from my chair. I reached for my clutch bag with steady hands, drawing out the moment, letting the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable. Derek's smirk faltered slightly. He had expected me to crumble, to cry, to run away. Instead, I was standing before him with an expression he had never seen on my face. Calm, controlled, dangerous. Actually, Derek, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. I would like to offer my own toast. I picked up my champagne glass still full and held it aloft. 5 years. You are absolutely right. It has been 5 years. 5 years of me giving up my career because you convinced me a good wife does not work. 5 years of me losing my friends because you monopolized all my time. 5 years of me doubting my own worth because you and your family made me feel like I should be grateful for every crumb of attention. Derek's face was beginning to change, the triumph morphing into uncertainty. You called me a gold digger, I continued. That is fascinating, considering I am the one who signed a prenup without hesitation because I had nothing to hide. I am the one who gave up a salary to become your unpaid housekeeper and social accessory. I am the one who asked for nothing except your love, which apparently was too much to expect. Muttering began to ripple through the crowd. This was not going according to script. I opened my clutch and withdrew the folder, holding it up so everyone could see. But here is where things get interesting. I placed the folder on the table and slid it across to Derek. The sound it made against the tablecloth seemed impossibly loud. Open it, I said. Derek stared at the folder like it might bite him. After a long moment, he reached out and flipped it open. I watched his face as he registered what he was seeing. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands began to tremble. That prenup you mentioned, I addressed the room while Derek sat frozen. The one that supposedly guarantees I leave with nothing. It is fraudulent. Someone forged modifications to the document after I signed it. I have the original here alongside the altered version your family lawyer filed. The differences are quite illuminating. Constance shot to her feet. That is a lie. You are making this up. I turned to face her with a pleasant smile. Am I? Perhaps you can explain why clauses that did not exist when I signed my name somehow appeared in the filed version. Perhaps your family lawyer can explain why his notarization dates do not match the timeline of our engagement. Harold stood up from his chair, his face thunderous. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his son. Derek. He growled. What is this about? I was not finished yet. But wait, I said, enjoying the way Derek flinched at my tone. There is more. I reached across and flipped to the next section of the folder, revealing the photographs Frank had taken. 2 years, I announced to the room. For 2 years, my devoted husband has been having an affair. Would you like to see the evidence? I spread the photographs across the table. Images of Derek and Megan at hotels, romantic dinners, the coastal resort getaway. Their bodies close, their hands intertwined, their guilt captured in high definition. The affair has been conducted with Megan. I continued, turning to point at the woman who had gone deathly pale in her seat at the back of the room. Clarissa's best friend. The woman who has been sitting here tonight waiting to watch me be humiliated. Clarissa whipped around to stare at Megan, her expression shifting from confusion to horror to fury in rapid succession. Derek finally found his voice rough and desperate. You went through my phone. That is an invasion of privacy. I laughed, a sound without warmth. Funny you should mention privacy, because about 30 minutes ago, I sent every single one of those text messages to everyone in your contact list. Your business partners received them. Your clients received them. Your golf buddies, your extended family, everyone you have ever exchanged numbers with now knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Derek grabbed his phone from his pocket, and I watched his face crumble as notification after notification flooded his screen. Messages and missed calls from numbers he recognized, people demanding explanations, people severing ties. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Constance tried again to regain control. This is slander. You cannot prove any of this. I turned to face her directly. Can I not? Then perhaps you can explain the $200,000 your son has embezzled from the family business over the past 18 months, the money he has been spending on hotels and gifts and an apartment for his mistress. I pulled out the financial records and held them up, every transaction documented, every receipt traced, every dollar accounted for. Harold's face had gone from red to nearly purple. He turned on Derek with an expression of pure rage. You stole from the company, from our family. Dad, I can explain, Derek stammered. Explain, Harold roared. You stole $200,000 to spend on your mistress. You have been lying to everyone, betraying your wife, betraying your family, betraying the business your grandfather built. I stepped back slightly, allowing the chaos to unfold. Constance was screaming at Harold. Clarissa had risen from her seat and was advancing on Megan with murder in her eyes. Derek sat frozen, watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. The room door opened, and Patricia walked in with her assistant, both of them projecting professional calm amid the pandemonium. "Perfect timing," I said. "Everyone, this is my attorney, Patricia. She has something for Derek." Patricia approached the table with measured steps and placed a leather portfolio in front of my husband. "These are divorce papers," she announced in a voice that cut through the noise. "Given the fraudulent prenuptial agreement and documented evidence of adultery, my client is entitled to 50% of all marital assets under state law. Additionally, we will be pursuing damages for fraud, emotional distress, and defamation based on the statements made here tonight." Derek stared at the papers as if they were his death warrant, which in a sense they were, the death of the lie he had been living. I leaned in close to him, speaking softly enough that only those nearby could hear. "You wanted to humiliate me tonight. You wanted everyone to see me broken and defeated. How does it feel to be on the receiving end?" Derek could not meet my eyes. From the back of the room, Megan's voice cut through the chaos, shrill and desperate. "Derek, tell them we love each other. Tell them I was not just some affair." Derek did not even look at her. He sat motionless, too shocked to respond to anyone. Megan's face crumpled as she realized the truth. The man she had waited 2 years for, the man she had helped deceive and betray, was not going to save her. He was not going to claim her. He was not going to do anything except sit there while his empire burned. "You promised me," Megan screamed. "You said you would leave her and we would be together. You said I was your real love." Clarissa reached Megan, then her voice shaking with fury. "You slept with my brother. You have been lying to me for 2 years. We were supposed to be best friends. I did not stay to watch the confrontation. My work here was done." I picked up my clutch, nodded to Patricia, and began walking toward the exit. Harper caught my eye as I passed her pen flying across her notebook, capturing every detail for what I suspected would be a very popular article. At the door, I paused and turned back one last time. The room was in complete disarray. Derek slumped in his chair, divorce papers in front of him, phone buzzing endlessly with angry messages. Harold shouting at Constance about what she knew and when she knew it, Clarissa crying and screaming at Megan, guests whispering and staring, unsure whether to stay or flee. I had walked into this room expecting to be destroyed. Instead, I had done the destroying. I stepped out into the cool night air where Denise was waiting with her car running. She took one look at my face and started laughing. "From the expression you are wearing," she said, "I assume it went well." I slid into the passenger seat and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. "Better than well," I told her. "Drive." The fallout from that night was swift and merciless. Harper's article was published 3 days later under a headline that made me smile every time I saw it. The story detailed everything: the fraudulent prenup, the affair, the embezzlement, the public confrontation at what was supposed to be an anniversary celebration. It spread through social media like wildfire, shared and commented on by thousands of people who had never heard of Derek or his family before, but who loved a good story of betrayal and revenge. Derek's professional life collapsed almost overnight. Harold made good on his threat, removing Derek from any position of authority within the family company and publicly announcing that his son was no longer part of the business. Clients who had read the article began withdrawing their accounts, unwilling to associate with someone whose judgment and ethics were so clearly compromised. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. Patricia was relentless, systematically dismantling every argument Derek's lawyers attempted to make. The fraudulent prenup was thrown out immediately once the judge saw the evidence of tampering. Without that protection, Derek was exposed to the full force of equitable distribution laws. In the end, I received 50% of all marital assets, which amounted to just over $3 million. On top of that, Patricia successfully argued for additional damages based on the fraud Derek had perpetrated. The final settlement gave me enough money to rebuild my life several times over. Megan did not fare any better. The exposure of her affair destroyed her reputation in the tight-knit social circles where she had built her identity. Clarissa publicly denounced her former best friend, and others followed suit. Within weeks, Megan had lost her job, her social standing, and any hope of a future with Derek. I heard she moved to another state to start over, though I did not particularly care where she went. Derek tried to contact me several times during the divorce process. Apologetic messages and voicemails full of explanations I did not want to hear. I blocked his number and had Patricia handle all communications. There was nothing he could say that would undo what he had done, and I had no interest in his remorse. Harold and Constance's marriage did not survive the scandal. Harold filed for divorce after discovering that Constance had known about Derek's affair and helped cover it up. The family that had looked down on me for 5 years was now tearing itself apart, and I found I could not muster any sympathy. 2 months after the anniversary dinner, when the chaos had finally begun to settle, I received a phone call that changed everything once again. The caller identified himself as Charles, an attorney from Ohio. He apologized for the delay in reaching me, explaining that he had been trying to track me down for several months. He had news about an inheritance. I assumed there must be some mistake. My parents were both alive, and I had no wealthy relatives that I knew of. But Charles explained that the inheritance came from my grandmother on my mother's side, a woman named Eleanor, who had passed away 2 years earlier. I remembered Grandma Eleanor well. She had been a fierce, independent woman who never seemed to fit the mold of a traditional housewife. She had divorced my grandfather in the early 1960s, a scandal in those days, and had lived alone ever since. She worked as a secretary for decades, living modestly in a small apartment, never seeming to have much money at all. Apparently, that impression had been very wrong. Charles explained that Eleanor had been quietly investing in real estate since the 1970s, small properties at first, then larger ones as her portfolio grew. She had lived frugally, not because she had to, but because she preferred to let her money work for her in the background. By the time of her death, her estate was worth nearly $5 million, and she had left all of it to me. I sat in stunned silence as Charles explained the details. Eleanor had specifically written in her will that she wanted me to have the financial independence she had always valued. She had been following my life from a distance, concerned about my marriage to Derek, but unwilling to interfere. She had hoped I would not need the inheritance, that my marriage would be happy and secure, but she had prepared it just in case. She believed in you, Charles told me. She wrote that she saw herself in you, and she wanted to make sure you would never be trapped by financial dependence on anyone. I thanked Charles through tears and promised to be in touch about the paperwork. After hanging up, I sat alone in my new apartment, the one I had rented with my settlement money, and thought about my grandmother. She had known. Somehow, across the distance of states and years, she had sensed that I might need saving, and she had prepared a gift that went far beyond money. She had given me the assurance that I would never have to depend on anyone but myself ever again. The irony was not lost on me. Derek and his family had called me a gold digger, a nobody who married above her station for money. They had been so certain I would leave with nothing. Instead, I left with more wealth than Derek himself would likely ever see again. And none of it had come from him or his family. It had come from a woman who loved me unconditionally and believed in my worth when no one else did. With my settlement and my inheritance combined, I had nearly $8 million. More money than I had ever imagined possessing, enough to do anything I wanted. The first thing I did was fly home to Ohio and visit my parents. We sat on the porch of my childhood home and talked for hours, really talked in a way we had not done since before my wedding. I apologized for distancing myself, for being so caught up in Derek's world that I had neglected my own. They forgave me instantly, as I knew they would, because that is what real family does. I visited Eleanor's grave and left flowers. I thanked her out loud, knowing she could not hear me, but needing to say the words anyway. I promised to honor her gift by living the kind of independent, self-determined life she had modeled for me. When I returned home, I began rebuilding in earnest. I went back to school for updated certifications, refreshing the accounting skills I had let languish during my marriage. I started my own financial consulting firm, focusing specifically on helping women understand and manage their money. Many of my clients were women in situations similar to mine, trapped in marriages where they had given up economic independence and were now trying to reclaim it. I donated a portion of my inheritance to organizations that support survivors of domestic financial abuse. I wanted Eleanor's money to help people she never knew but would have cared about if she had. Slowly, I built a new life, one that belonged entirely to me. 1 year after the anniversary dinner that ended my marriage and began my freedom, I sat in my home office and reflected on everything that had changed. My consulting firm was thriving. I had 12 employees now, each of them dedicated to the mission of financial empowerment. We had helped hundreds of clients understand their worth in concrete numerical terms, showing them how to build security that no one could take away. My relationship with my parents was stronger than ever. I flew home regularly, no longer ashamed of where I came from, but proud of the people who raised me. My father still worked as an electrician, my mother still worked as a nurse, and I had tried to give them money to retire early, but they had refused. They said they liked their work, liked feeling useful, liked the routine. I understood. Denise remained my closest friend, the one person who had stood by me through everything. We met for dinner every week, and she delighted in reminding me of the night she had been my getaway driver, the night I had walked out of that restaurant leaving destruction in my wake. I had started dating again cautiously and carefully. His name was Nathan, and he was nothing like Derek. He worked for a nonprofit organization that built affordable housing. He drove a 10-year-old car and lived in a modest apartment and had never in his life called a woman a gold digger. We were taking things slowly, neither of us in a rush, both of us valuing the connection more than any timeline. I no longer thought about Derek often. The anger had faded, replaced by something closer to indifference. He had lost almost everything: his job, his family's trust, his social standing, his mistress who had abandoned him when the money dried up. Last I heard, he was living in a rental apartment, working a mid-level sales position, stripped of everything that had once made him feel powerful. I did not wish him well, but I did not waste energy wishing him ill either. He simply did not matter anymore. What mattered was the life I had built from the ashes of my old one. A life where my worth was not determined by who I married or where I came from. A life where I made my own choices and controlled my own destiny. A life my grandmother Eleanor would have been proud of. Late one evening, I pulled out my journal and wrote about the journey. The words came easily flowing from a place of peace rather than pain. I used to think I needed someone else to complete me. Derek made me feel like I was nothing without him and his money. But losing everything I thought I had gave me the chance to find what I actually needed: myself. The irony still makes me smile sometimes. They called me a gold digger, but I ended up with more gold than they ever imagined. And none of it came from them. My grandmother, a woman who never depended on anyone, gave me the gift of independence from beyond the grave. But the real treasure is not the money. It is the knowledge that I am enough, that I always was, that no one can take my worth away because it was never theirs to give or take in the first place. I closed my journal and looked around my office. Photographs lined the walls, images of my new life. My parents at my firm's opening party, Denise and me laughing at brunch, clients who had written thank you notes for helping them find financial freedom. Eleanor's portrait serious and proud, watching over everything. I had walked into that anniversary dinner expecting to lose everything. Instead, I had found everything I never knew I was missing. If you are watching this and you are in a relationship where you feel small, where you are constantly made to feel worthless, where you have given up pieces of yourself to please someone who does not deserve your sacrifice, I want you to know something important. There is another way. You do not have to wait for a dramatic moment to reclaim your life. You can start now today with one small step toward independence. Learn about your finances. Reconnect with the friends you have neglected. Remember who you were before they made you forget. And if the dramatic moment does come, if you find yourself standing in the ruins of a life that was never really yours to begin with, remember this: you have more power than you think. The truth is always on your side. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they knew your worth better than you did? Have you ever turned a moment meant to destroy you into a moment of triumph? I would love to hear your stories, so please share them in the comments below. If this story meant something to you, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share it with a friend or family member who might need to hear that they are stronger than they believe. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. I hope it gave you something valuable, whether that is hope or courage, or simply the reminder that the best revenge is living well on your own terms. wishing you strength, clarity, and the unwavering belief that your worth is yours alone to define. Never let anyone tell you otherwise.